Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One to One. Each week, we address issues of timely and timeless concern with newsmakers and the journalists who report on them, with writers, artists, scientists, educators, social scientists, government and nonprofit leaders. We speak with each one to one. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Robin Steinberg, who's created a public defender's office that is like no other. The Bronx Defenders has grown from a staff of 8 in 1997 to 190 lawyers, social workers, and advocates today. But the organization does far more than provide legal expertise to its thousands of low-income clients. It provides what it calls a holistic defense. Welcome.
Thank you.
So you're one of the founders of Bronx Defenders. What led you to the Bronx and to founding this organization?
I had been a public defender for about 15 years in several different organizations, and the City of New York put out a request for proposals asking for people to create new defender offices in different boroughs. I thought long and hard about that opportunity. I thought long and hard about whether that was a good thing to do, whether it was something I thought I was capable of doing, and decided that, you know, with a bunch of other people that we could take our years of experience and try to create something new and create something different and something that I hoped and I dreamed would be more responsive to clients' needs and the needs of the community.
What was the crime like in the Bronx in 1997?
You know, it was varied. There were certainly a lot of people being arrested, as there are today. I think that crime patterns and trends have changed over the past 15 years, but mostly what you see is people coming into the criminal justice system now are coming in almost exclusively for misdemeanors and for minor nonviolent crimes.
In New York, most of the defense of low-income defendants is done by nonprofits who receive, I guess, both government money and private money. How are you different, say, from the Legal Aid Society in terms of, I don't know, whatever?
So the Legal Aid Society is also a not-for-profit.
Okay.
It also has contracts with the City of New York and then seeks funding from other sources, just like the Bronx Defenders. So in terms of corporate structure, we're the same.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of vision and model, I think that we probably are slightly different. The first being that we focus only and exclusively in the Bronx, on that community, on the clients that we represent from that community. Also, we employ, as you said, holistic defense as a way of representing people in the criminal justice system, and that's different, I think, than what you see from other public defenders across the country.
Now, the Legal Aid Society is the largest nonprofit that does this kind of work in the city, correct?
Yes, it is, indeed.
How do your caseloads compare?
Caseloads per individual attorney? I mean, we represent about...
No, I mean per organization.
So we represent about 30,000 people in the Bronx a year. We do about 40% of the criminal cases in the Bronx. We do about 90% of the family court cases on removal petitions in the Bronx. So we're doing a substantial portion of the work in the Bronx.
Okay, it's the largest in the city.
It is, and it has an office in every borough.
Okay, okay. And the whole 18B, the court-appointed lawyers, that's a much smaller group of attorneys, correct?
Yes, the 18...
I think I read recently about 1,000 in the city.
I don't know what the exact numbers are, but it is a smaller group of people. The 18B panel was really created and devised to do what we call the conflict work. So if two people come in charged with crimes from the same incident, it would be a conflict, for example, for the Bronx Defenders to represent both of the people charged, right? Because they might have antagonistic defenses. So in a conflict situation, the 18B lawyer, who is a private lawyer who's agreed to be on the panel and has been screened to be on a panel, would be assigned to that case to co-counsel with us.
I see. So again, how many lawyers do you have?
We have about 190 advocates on our staff now. About 120 of those people are lawyers. About 70 are civil legal advocates, other kind of advocates, social workers, parent advocates, investigators, community organizers, policy workers, a whole host of disciplines.
And these are staff lawyers as opposed to, these are all staff lawyers, full-time for you?
Yes, everybody's full-time.
Okay.
And yes.
So where and how do you get your clients?
So it's not that sophisticated. We are the people in arraignments on certain days of the week, and the Legal Aid Society is the other organization in arraignments on other days of the week. So that's how we divide that up. I would also say that the Bronx Defenders uniquely has what we call community intake, meaning we have a intake team that actually is present in the community that will allow anybody from the community to come in through our doors, talk to a lawyer, talk to one of the advocates, and assess whether they need legal help in criminal or another area. The other thing we do is we have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week hotline. So if somebody needs access to a lawyer and a detective has come by, they are wanted for a warrant, somebody's come to do an investigation, they can call our hotline anytime of the day or night, and that's unique to the Bronx Defenders.
And they have to be a Bronx resident. Or do they?
They have to have their case in the Bronx. Now, what's interesting about that is almost everybody who is arrested in the Bronx lives in the Bronx. So it's a borough that most of the people coming through the criminal justice system are from that community. That's slightly different than other boroughs like Manhattan, where you see people coming into Times Square in different areas from different communities and different states.
And is there an income requirement?
You must be indigent. So usually you can determine that fairly easily by employment status, whether you're receiving public assistance, whether you're living in public housing. But the requirement is that you have to be indigent.
And your services are totally free?
Yes, they are.
Okay, okay. The great majority of your cases are criminal cases. So I was going to ask you, are we talking about all the way from murder and rape cases all the way down to disorderly conduct?
Riding your bicycle on a sidewalk.
Really?
Yes,
Okay.
and everything in between.
Okay. And you said that a majority of the cases are misdemeanors?
Yeah, what's fascinating about policing in the city of New York over the past, several years is that it has moved from a system where we were arresting people for actual crime that was occurring. And in fact, what we begin to focus on is that 85% of people coming through the criminal justice system in New York City are charged with misdemeanors. Most of those misdemeanors don't involve any complaining witnesses or other people.
We're talking about crimes like what?
Trespass, possession of marijuana, graffiti, petty larceny, minor assaults, fight in the schoolyard, fight in the bar, those kinds of cases. The overwhelming majority of people being hauled into the criminal justice system in New York City are charged with misdemeanors now.
There's a trial going on right now in federal court challenging the constitutionality of the NYPD's stop-and-frisk policy and charging that it discriminates against people of color. I would imagine this policy has had a big impact on your clients.
It's had a huge impact on our clients. We see it every day. I mean, if you work in the Bronx and you have an office in the South Bronx like we do, you literally see it. You can be on a street corner picking up your food from a bodega and watch it as it happens in front of you. We do a lot of community outtake and community outreach. And as part of the community outreach, we go out into the community and we talk to kids in high schools, kids in junior high schools, tenant organizations, local sort of community groups. And what we hear over and over and over again is the effect that stop and frisk is having on the community. It's
Black and Latino primarily.
Black and Latino primarily, almost exclusively. I was out at a high school on Friday, and we were doing a Know Your Rights training with a bunch of young men. It was an all young men's school. And we began to talk about stop and frisk. And at first, the young men were reluctant to talk about it. And by the end of the class, what you really heard was almost every young man in that class had at some point had an unpleasant interaction with the police around stop and frisk. Not resulting in an arrest, not resulting in anybody finding any contraband or weapons on them, just basically being stopped in the middle of the night, brought down to their knees, searched, and then let go. And we talked a lot with those young men about what that experience is like, how soul-searing that can be, how humiliating that is, how enraging that experience can be, and how it really leads you to have some sense of mistrust of the police department that really is supposed to be serving your community, instead undermining your confidence in them and your sense of fairness in the justice system.
Now,
it's a very real problem.
Police Commissioner Ray Kelly says, he defends it, saying the stop and frisk saves lives, though I assume you would like to see an end to the policy.
I would like to see an end to the policy, or at least a severe cutback of the policy. And if you're going to do a stop and frisk, it should be founded on something other than the color of your skin or the clothes you're wearing or the neighborhood you live in or the size of your bank account. And that's what I'd like to see change. So yeah, I would like to see that rolled back in any new police commissioner or Commissioner Kelly.
Tell me about some of the kinds of civil cases that you handle.
Everything from housing to immigration, public benefits, employment, family court proceedings. We really follow our clients into those areas of their lives that are being affected by an arrest. So when you get arrested in 2013 in New York City, there are all these other consequences that begin to happen that go on outside the criminal court. Nobody sees it. The criminal court judges don't see it. The prosecutors don't see it. We see it because we're in the community working with clients. But you might have a criminal case that's even a minor misdemeanor, and the result may be that you lose your federal financial aid to go to college. The result might be that you become deportable. The result might be that you get an eviction notice. The result might be that you wind up in family court with a child welfare investigation. Or the police may take your property, and then you have to go through a whole procedure to try to get it back, even though it was unrelated to any crime.
So you wind up fighting against those consequences.
We do. We try to guard against the consequences, and when we can't guard against them, we provide representation.
Other than the fact that more and more of your cases have moved, are now misdemeanors, have the kinds of cases that you handle changed over the years in other ways since 1990s?
You know,
Seven?
I'll tell you what has changed is the ability to get a case to trial, or the ability to get a case to a hearing. The ability to get your client to have his or her day in court has become almost non-existent. And I think that's because the pressures of the numbers coming in. But
Pressures to plead?
To plead guilty, and the numbers are so enormous of people that are being shoveled into the system that the resources that exist can't possibly sort of provide you know, courtrooms and hearings and trials to actually have people's day in court. So there becomes this intense pressure on people to plead guilty. And you hear all the time, you can sit in any courtroom and you'll hear judges and prosecutors all the time, but I offered him this, why isn't he taking it? And the answer may be, he wasn't there, he didn't do it, you can't prove it, whatever the answers are. But to get a case to a trial is almost impossible. The delay is staggering, and the constant coming back and forth to court, right? So it's not benign, right? It's like you get arrested and then you have to come back to court every 3 weeks for the next 2 years till you get to your trial. Most people give up, right? Most people will say, I can't miss another day of work.
And they
I can't hire another babysitter to watch my kids, and they plead guilty, where sort of the process becomes the punishment.
I assume that there are potential clients that you have to turn away. I assume you can't service everybody who comes to you looking for help.
As long as somebody comes in who has a case either in the criminal justice system or has a family court case where there has been an Article 10 filed against them for removal of their children and to place them in foster care, we will represent clients on any of the matters that come in. We have not turned people away unless they just walk in from the community and may not have a case connected to the criminal justice system or the family court system, in which case we also won't just turn them away, but we'll have one of our advocates or lawyers sit down with them and try to either connect them to other people in the community that do that work or help them think about pro se ways to go about defending themselves on those matters.
We're going to take a short break. Then we'll be back with more with Robin Steinberg, Executive Director of Bronx Defenders, after this message.
Ma, guess what? I went back to college. No, I didn't quit my job. I'm finishing my degree with a CUNY online bachelor's in business. I interact online with real City University of New York faculty on a schedule that fits my busy life. Ma, you should look who's teaching at CUNY. And it all leads to a high-quality Bachelor of Science degree in business. I can attend class anywhere, anytime. Yes, Mom, even at your house Friday night for dinner.
The CUNY Online Baccalaureate. Get back to business.
Welcome back to One to One. I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York, and I'm talking with Robin Steinberg, Executive Director of Bronx Defenders. You say you give your clients a holistic defense. What does that mean?
It means that our office is structured in a way where we have interdisciplinary teams. And on each of those 9 teams, we have advocates in 10 different disciplines. We do that because what we know is that when clients come into the criminal justice system, there are a host of other issues that are almost always inevitably present. So we're looking at both the underlying problems driving people into the criminal justice system and offering opportunities for clients to address some of those issues. And we are trying to address the collateral and enmeshed consequences of criminal justice involvement that go far beyond the criminal courthouse. Holistic defense defense is really designed, I think, to look at the whole person, not define them by their case, to look at sort of all the circumstances, not define them by their docket number, and to really think sort of holistically about how we can provide services, what kind of defense needs to be done. And another important part of holistic defense is ongoing engagement with the client community, so that we can be informed as advocates, right, coming into the community about what the needs are of our clients, where the areas are that we need to create resources, how we can address the issues that people in the community are facing, and how we can become a public defender office that a community might want to embrace, rather than see it as antagonistic to their interests. So we have grown in large measure in response to what we've learned from the community and from the clients that we serve.
So give me an example of, how an individual case and how the holistic defense might play out.
Sure. So a client comes in and she's charged with a drug case. What we learn after we interview her and we bring a social worker into the case is that she has had a lifelong heroin problem. We know right away that what we're going to do is try to work on that criminal case, obviously, right, and try to get her the best defense, the least restrictive disposition we can, try to get her an alternative to incarceration, perhaps deal with the drug problem if that's where she is, and coming from her shoes, that's what she wants to do. So the social worker and the lawyer might work on that. But what you'll see happen is that same woman then gets an eviction notice from public housing because she's been arrested for a drug case. And now her children actually are being removed from her and put into foster care because of the arrest. So what we would do is bring a team in, and she'd be represented by a team with a housing lawyer, with a family court lawyer, with a parent advocate, with a social worker, and with a criminal defense lawyer who would look at the various issues, how they impact each other, and enable her and empower her to prioritize for herself what's most important here and where are the impacts that we're going to see because of this criminal arrest, and what can we do to best protect you from the devastating consequences of this arrest. And that's one of the many ways that it might involve. That client then later on, when their case is over, may become involved in one of our town hall meetings, may become involved in one of our organizing efforts in the community to also then begin to empower community members to actually seek justice on their own.
Now, legal aid, I was looking at the legal aid society, they also have social workers. So, but they are not doing this holistic kind of thing to the extent that you are, or would they say differently? I don't know.
I'd leave that to them. But the Bronx Defenders, I think the thing that stands separate is both the depth and the breadth of the services, but also that clients are represented by integrated interdisciplinary teams. That's really the difference, right? So it's all under one roof. It's a one-stop shop. So when clients come in through one lawyer, if they come into the criminal justice system or through community intake or through family court, they then get introduced to this
their team.
And they don't have to navigate another intake system. They don't have to do another personal interview about all the details of their lives. They don't have to hope that somebody has an intake day or there's availability. That team will be their team forever. And that team will work with them. And a lot of times what we see is clients may come in on one case and then 6 months later something springs from it that we didn't see coming. Mm-hmm. And they can come back and they can work with their team again. We tell our clients, once you're a Bronx Defender, you're always a Bronx Defender, and you're always welcome to come back and access the services that we had on your interdisciplinary team and with those advocates.
Is there a success story or two you can share with us?
You know, success is a really interesting thing. I think there are success stories every day. I mean, our clients inspire us to do this work. It is, you certainly wouldn't do this work as long as I have because what's going on in the system inspires you. What inspires you is the courage and the tenacity of the clients that we represent under very, very difficult circumstances, facing enormous obstacles. So sure, the description I gave you of a client, I have a client who came in and actually dealt with her drug problem, got her children back, got permanent housing, went back to school, and is about to graduate on May 29th from college. And we'll be right there, about 6 of us will be right there at her graduation cheering her on. But there are success stories in little ways and large ways all the time. The young person that gets her GED, right? The mom that's able to get her kids back and be a good parent. I mean, there's a lot there in small ways and in large ways that are success stories.
Are your clients essentially, virtually, all Black and Hispanic?
Yes.
They are?
Yes.
And what does that say?
And all poor. It says that we're policing poor communities of color in New York City. What it says is that, you know, crime is almost never about character, in my opinion. I'm 30 years of doing this work. It is almost always about circumstance. It is almost always related to poverty. It is almost always about all of the negative effects that spring from poverty and growing up in neighborhoods that are under-resourced, where access to education is limited, access to jobs is limited, where people have been stigmatized by criminal records generation after generation and can't move forward even when they try. Neighborhoods that have woeful lack of access to health care or mental health care, and communities, and very importantly, that are over-policed, aggressively policed, and I think policed in a racially biased and frankly unfair way. And so from that springs a lot of consequences and a lot of results. And so our clients are, in the criminal justice system all throughout New York City, you will see overwhelmingly are poor Black and Latino young men. There's a huge gender distinction as well.
There's been a lot of noise in recent years about the fact that a large number of Americans are in need of legal services but don't have access to them, I guess presumably because they can't afford lawyers, which seems ironic given that there are so many law school graduates these days who don't have jobs. Is there a way to channel them into public defender work, do you think?
You know, I'd like to think so. I think part of this is getting the message out. I think part of it is explaining to law school students that that going into work and using your law degree to make the world better, to serve clients who need you, to take on social and racial justice issues in this country, that's the kind of work that actually will make you grateful that you got a law degree every single day of your life. And I can't say that for most lawyers I know who are toiling away in those big, tall buildings and law firms, many of whom are unhappy. Their bank accounts are bigger, but I don't think they've used their degree in the same way. There's nothing like doing work, I think, for the social justice and racial justice in this country that will give you the sense of making a difference, in ways that all of us should care about.
New York State Chief Justice Jonathan Lippman recently announced, I think starting this year, all lawyers who are seeking to be admitted to the New York bar are going to have to show that they provided 50 hours of free legal services to the poor. Is that a good, I assume you support that mandate, or do you not?
I mean, I support it to the extent that I believe it's important for everybody in the legal profession, but I think it's important for everybody in our society to understand what's happening to poor people in this country and where the impacts of lack of access to justice and lawyers really, really can careen you, into terrible consequences. And so I think it's a really important thing to do. If somebody just comes and they do a couple weeks of pro bono work in our office, I like to think that experience has been transformative. I like to think that the experience of working with our clients, of being in the community, of seeing what happens to people who are charged with even minor cases, that will have an impact, I think, on the larger conversation in our society, and that's why I think it's particularly a good idea.
Tell us about your new center.
So we created a client and community reception space. And what that really means is we have taken one of the spaces that's part of our Justice Campus, and it is a place where clients and community members can come in and sit in comfortable, welcoming places, get information about all sorts of services available, not just at the Bronx Defenders, but also in the community, where children are welcome and there are places that they can play, where clients get treated with respect, where they can talk to an advocate at any time that they come in. It really was designed to allow more people from the community to come in and get exactly what you were talking about, which is access to lawyers and access to advocates who might be able to, if they can't help on the individual cases, point them in the right direction, or hopefully connect them with other community resources that can.
Now you have, and tell us your location again. Where are you?
So we are on 161st Street between Cortlandt and Melrose.
Now you have, in the Morrisania section of the Bronx,
Yes.
okay. You've been a public defender for your entire legal career. What drew you to that area of law, and what do you see as the strengths and weaknesses of the current public defender system?
So I went to law school absolutely 100%, absolutely convinced I was going to be a women's rights litigator. That's what I wanted to do. I was deeply influenced by the feminists of my time. I was a feminist at a very early age, and I wanted to do women's rights litigation. I thought that would be it. So when I graduated from college, I went to Berkeley, to UC Berkeley, and I got a women's studies degree. I thought, okay, I'm going to look around for a law school that has a women's rights clinic or women's rights law, and I couldn't really find any. But NYU had this clinic called the Women's Prison Project. It had the word women in it. I thought, That must be it.
That was something.
That's how sophisticated my analysis was. And so I applied to NYU. I was lucky enough to get in. I went to NYU Law School. And indeed, in my second year in law school, I participated in what was called the Women's Prison Project. And it was a clinic that allowed us to go to Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, which is the maximum security women's prison in New York, and to work with the women in prison on the civil issues that were actually confronting them. So I worked with some of the women at Bedford on child care issues, meaning the child welfare people weren't getting their kids to visit them. They had health care issues that they needed lawyers to advocate for them, different civil matters that were affecting their lives. And I have to say that as I sat there that year and I met more and more women and I heard more and more of their stories and I began to internalize their voices, I was fascinated by both their sense of the criminal justice system, which was outrage. Everybody feels like they had been railroaded. Nobody knew the name of their lawyers. Nobody had very nice things to say about most public defenders. And it began to really sort of open my eyes, and I began to wonder what is going on in the criminal justice system that A, these incredibly vibrant, interesting women are doing enormous amounts of time in prison, and that B, they have such a dismal view of what happened to them. And so my third year in law school, there was a criminal defense clinic, and I enrolled in that. And I stepped foot in Manhattan Criminal Court that very first time, which I think I will never forget. It is an image that is seared in my brain forever. And I looked around, and quite frankly, I was horrified. You couldn't not be horrified. I really think everybody has to do a day in criminal court. Just sit in the back and watch as people are brought before the judge. Black and Latino young men, their families are sitting in the audience. People are crying. People are incredibly dismissive of the human beings that are in handcuffs in front of them. People are being treated in degrading and dehumanizing ways, and justice looks about 10 seconds long for most of those cases. And usually the client or the person who's charged is standing at the defense table almost irrelevant to what's happening. Everybody else is running around, and there's that person, that young man, standing there by himself, once in a while trying to get a glimpse of his family behind him, then getting screamed at by a court officer to stop turning around. And I thought to myself, this is like a terrible car accident. This is like, how can you walk by all of this damage and all of this hurt and not want to do something?
Yeah.
And I never turned back.
Good for you.
Never.
And as for your assessment of the public defenders, it's going to have to wait till the next show because we're out of time.
Okay.
My thanks to Robin Steinberg, Executive Director of Bronx Defenders. If you'd like more information, please go to their website at bronxdefenders.org. For the City University of New York and 1-to-1, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. If there are any people you'd like to hear from or topics you'd like us to explore, please let us know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.